Well, welcome everybody. I'm really glad that you could join us tonight. We've been looking forward to, I know we've been chatting back and forth through emails and a little bit by telephone, but I'm glad you could join us tonight. I'm glad you'll be joining us for the course. I think you'll really get a lot out of the course in terms of helping clients and pet parents at a very difficult time. Just a couple of quick things in terms of questions. We will have a question and answer period at the end. There are a couple of times during the webinar where we will be, what went away, Annalie?
The echo's gone.
Oh, okay. All right. Where we'll actually be asking you questions. If you have questions, you see the chat box there, please feel free to put any questions in there, or you can jot them down. And like I said, we will get through all the questions at the end of the webinar. You could expect to be with us tonight, probably about an hour and a half, maybe a little bit more, depending on how many questions there are. And then at the end of the webinar too, we are going to talk about a little bit about where you go from here and how to get the most out of the course. So here's our goals for today's class. Whoops, this does this to me all the time. Okay, which is really, we're going to give you an introduction to the course. We're going to talk a little bit about grief in general, because pet loss is a disenfranchised type of grief, but it is grief, and there are some basic things that you should know about that. Then we will talk about understanding pet loss. And we'll also talk about what characteristics are going to help you become the best pet loss specialist possible. So in terms of what to expect during the course, we do assume that you have no knowledge in pet loss bereavement. You may have immense knowledge, or you might not have any at all. That's okay. We want everyone to understand that we approach the course as if you have no knowledge. Within each module, there is an assignment, and in order to receive the RACE CEs and the actual certification that makes you a pet loss specialist, you do have to score at least 70% or higher on each module. This is nothing to panic about. It's not difficult to do. It does take work. You do have, let's say you didn't pass the module, you do have a couple of extra chances where we guide you to score at least a 70. In each assignment, you are going to see a quiz. Obviously, it's all open book or open module. There is a rating assignment, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the course. It's either going to be talking about a loss that you've gone through, actually doing a few interviews with people who have had a loss. But again, we will talk a little bit more about that at the end. And what's a really good resource is the guidelines handout that we gave you. That really will help you, and we really suggest you take the time to read that over and keep it with you as you're doing each module. The written assignments, again, not hard. You do not have to turn in the reflection. That's for your own growth or your own understanding. Our students in the past have told us that they spend anywhere between 2 to 4 hours, so probably an average of like 3 hours a week, in order to complete each module. Again, the reflection is something, if you really want us to read it, please do indicate that, because otherwise we just skip right by it. So put in the email, can you please take a look at my reflection if it's something you want us to look at. Whoops. The thing I believe that sets us apart from some of the other pet loss courses out there is that we really want to provide you with usable tools and help you feel comfortable in supporting grieving pet parents. No matter how much information you learn in any course, there's always a learning curve once you finish the material. But this course is really designed to help you feel more comfortable in putting the information into practice. And so, with that in mind, we do give you opportunities to get comfortable with the information, get comfortable with talking to people who have lost a pet. We also do have 3 optional group calls where you can connect with others and talk about things, have questions that you didn't get a chance to ask. So I don't know about you, but whenever I take any one of these courses, I'm always curious to know, well, who are these people that are giving the course and where did they get the knowledge and the experience and what their journey is? And so we're going to spend just a few minutes introducing ourselves to you and telling you a little bit about our journey. That is me when I was much younger. My background is in business. I spent 20 years in business. I do have my doctorate in organizational psychology, but it was back in 2007 when I lost that beautiful soul, Mazel Tov, on the left-hand side. He was my 17-year-old chocolate point Siamese, and truthfully, he was my world. I was not married. I had no children. And he really got me through so much of life. He got me through grad school, the end of a long-term relationship, and then unfortunately losing both my parents in a short period of time. And that was all before he got sick. So he was my best friend, my furry soulmate, if you want to say it, and definitely one of the greatest teachers I've ever had. Losing him was devastating. And at that time, I lived in LA. And even in a city like LA, there wasn't a lot of support back in 2007. I did find support though, and as I began to heal, I felt like Maz was guiding me and teaching me still, and I decided I wanted to help others who were grieving the loss of a pet. And so I got trained and certified, been doing this work since 2010. I do a couple of virtual support groups each week. I offer individual support either by telephone or through Zoom as well. And then Pet Loss Partners does have 2 online chat rooms each week. Basically, this work really is my passion. I can't end this little part without mentioning that beautiful girl, that little calico or a tortie on the right-hand side. Her name was Callie. I lost her in 2012, and even though I was a pet loss specialist at the time, losing her still really hurt. She came into our lives as a stray cat, but she came with her own gifts. And Callie and Maz are why I do what I do. They're why I'm here with you today. And during this process since 2010, I've really gotten to meet some amazing people, 2 of which I work with, and only one is here today. But I'm going to introduce Connie to you and let her tell you a little bit about herself and her journey into working in this field. So, Connie?
Hi, everybody. Good to see all of you. I'm here for much the same reason that Sandy is, except in my case, it was a dog. And I lost Ruby, a beautiful Siberian Husky. She was only 4.5, and I lost her to lymphoma.
Connie,
And
we have to get a picture of you and Ruby for next time.
I know we can. We say that every time. I'm going to send it to you right after.
Okay.
Yeah, she was gorgeous. Lost her to lymphoma. And so at the time I was at City University in Seattle getting my master's in counseling psychology. And for my master's thesis, we could do a thesis or a project. And I don't know how many of you have gone through grad school, but by about the end of grad school, you don't want to write another paper. So I thought, I'll do a project. And little did I know it was an awful lot of writing. But I was a volunteer at the Seattle Animal Shelter walking dogs. I proposed a pet loss support group sponsored by the shelter. They just were 100% behind me. We've been going since 2006, meeting weekly. COVID sent us into the virtual world, and so we meet via Zoom. And it was a really wonderful experience. After I lost Ruby, and I developed this group, and I really liked what I was doing. I kind of was poking around online, wondering, I wonder if I could do this someplace else. And I found Association for Pet Loss and Bereavement, and that's where I met Sandy. And I became a host there. Sandy became a host there, and then she ran away and developed Pet Loss Partners with a wonderful gal that lives in LA named Ellie, and she had a Siberian Husky named Jake, and that's how she came to Association for Pet Loss and Bereavement. And I just lost my Siberian Husky Jake 3 months ago, so it's all kind of coming full circle. And I love this work. I do have individual counseling. I'm retired, and I live in the Cascade Mountains with my husband and 7 Huskies. It used to be 8, and it's really been hard to have an uneven number of Huskies. But we just have a wonderful life with them. And like Sandy said, there are everything. And when we lose them, boy, we're therapists, we're trained, we know how to grieve, we know how you're supposed to grieve until it happens to you. And then, yeah, it's really, really hard. So I really appreciate you all wanting to learn more about this field. It's so rewarding. You'll hear so many sad stories, but I tell you, during my studies, we did have a course on grief and loss, and one of our assignments, and you guys will be doing this, was to go interview a grief counselor. And so I went and I interviewed this gal. She was wonderful. She also did pet loss grief counseling. And I asked her, why did you choose this field? Because when you go into therapy, you can do all kinds of things, marriage and family, and grief counseling. And she goes, because my clients get better. And I was like, oh, and so if you want to go into a counseling field and have your clients, for the most part, get better, it is. And you actually see them on their journey and you watch them. And we see that in our chat rooms and our support groups. And it's really a wonderful thing to watch these people heal. So I think that's it, right?
Yeah, and Connie, and I'll just say this, and we're going to talk about it throughout the course, and you kind of alluded to it, and I've been through it, even though, like I said, when I lost Callie, I was doing this work. Was the loss easier? Absolutely not. Was it easier to work my way through the difficult parts? Absolutely. And I know, Connie, right? You took some time off just a few months ago when you lost Jake.
Yeah. Yeah. Because and Sandy will say this when we get to the self-care part of the course, is you can't pour from an empty cup. And so if you're grieving yourself, you cannot support someone else who is grieving. I mean, I knew I couldn't talk to someone who had just lost their pet. I would just have been a hot, blubbering mess. And so you just really have to be the vessel for those people's pain. And when your vessel is full of your own pain, you can't do the work. So, and and we've had students have a loss during the course, and we'll always give you some extra time to do your coursework if something like that happens. But yeah, it's very rewarding work.
Yeah. So now that we've spent this time telling you about us, we want to know a little bit about you. And so we're going to ask you this question, and please just put your answers in the chat box, and then Connie will kind of summarize them for me, because when I have it as a full screen, I can't see it. So what type of work are you currently involved in? Are you in any kind of mental health, social work therapist, or a pet sitter, or rescue, or veterinary, or aftercare humans, or pet loss, or go ahead, or any kind of caregiver Go ahead and fill that in.
Lots of veterinary,
Okay.
pet loss. Oh, someone in pet loss. Yay. Caregiver, uh, CPR trained. Oh, a marriage and family therapist. Yeah, lots of veterinary and caregiver. Oh, funeral director. Wow.
Wow. And,
Oh.
and so here's the thing, and this is the reason that we ask you to answer this question. And hold on, let me get rid of that. Okay. Is as you can see, people come from many different backgrounds. There's going to be vet techs and veterinarians and pet sitters or just someone who has lost a pet and wants the information for their own growth. Whether you have experience or not, it's okay. We're going to be working on this course together. You're going to pick up a lot of information and knowledge and skills which you will use to serve your clients by helping them on their grief journey. So let's talk about understanding grief a bit. And in order to help others with their grief, you must understand it yourself. It's critical, right? It's similar to teaching someone to drive a car. You certainly could not teach someone to drive a car without knowing how to do it yourself. Same thing is true for grief counseling. You have to understand grief before you can help others. And that's what we're going to be doing throughout the course and throughout this 10 modules. Actually, here's another question for you, and it's this. What is your level of knowledge or experience in grief and bereavement? And it could be anything from none, I've never even suffered any major losses, all the way to one of these or something else. So go ahead and put that in the text box as well. How we doing there, Connie?
It's all over the map. Mostly mostly everybody has heard about the stages of grief. Yeah, it's kind of hard to not.
Yeah.
And then people have studied, yeah, have experienced losses and studied grief.
And I think I want to say this too, and Connie and I often get into these conversations. And again, it doesn't matter whether if you've never had any experience or if you work in a bereavement related field. As I said, Connie and I always talk about the fact. I mean, when I think about the knowledge I had when I first started this course to now, I mean, I'm a completely different pet loss specialist because I've been doing this going on 15 years, right? And we always find books. We just found a really good book that we'll share with you a little bit later on, that taught us things that we didn't know. And I think that's what I like so much about working with Connie, and you'll meet Sharon too, is that we're always finding new articles and new things that we didn't know, because you can always learn something new. It might be about human loss, it may be about pet loss, but I mean, Connie, don't you agree with that? Or
Oh, absolutely. And, people study this stuff. And what's been really interesting, if you keep up in any of the writings about grief, is now, for a while, the DSM-4, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of mental disorders.
yes. I was gonna let you get through that there.
Didn't even address bereavement and grief. And now they've got, they had it in there, but it didn't have a code. And now it's been, sanctioned or whatever. It's got a code, but and it's interesting because grief counselors, they have, different opinions about stuff too. And some people, and I agree with this, is that kind of pathologizes grief. Because,
Yeah.
you know, one thing that you'll learn, and this is so important to tell your clients who come to you and say, I think I'm going crazy. I didn't feel like this when my mom died. And they go, this is a normal and natural response to a loss. Grief is normal and natural. And so by pathologizing it, you know, well, is it? And so there's all kinds of controversy, or I don't know, controversy, but, you know, discussion around
Yeah.
this. There's another uh, good article that we were passing around about stop trying to heal from your grief.
Yeah.
Because so many people will just, you know, well, it's been 2 weeks, you know, how come you're still crying every day, and that type of thing. And so makes, you know, you feel guilty for grieving. And so there's this other side where, no, you know, this is normal and natural. You need to go through this. So it's really interesting. You can just you know, read until the cows come home. All of the current writing on grieving and how to do it. And really there is no how to.
Yeah.
There's advice, and there's, you know, gentle guidance, but no one can tell you how to grieve.
Yeah, we will, like I said, both Connie and I, kind of work most, and we'll talk about this in the middle of the course, with Alan Wolfeld's perspective of companioning people through grief. But again, that's kind of getting ahead of ourselves a bit. So let's go ahead and get back to it. And Connie, of course, if there's anything I really need to address, just let me know. Okay. All right, so oh, here we go. Come on. There we go. So if you remember, I mentioned that before losing Maz, I lost my dad and then my mom in a 40-year period. And that was devastating in its own way. So when Maz started to get sick, I really thought I was kind of prepared as the end of his life approached. I thought, you know, okay, I'll be able to handle this. I definitely have enough experience, but boy, was I wrong. His loss really took me to a new level, and that is the thing. There are definitely some similarities between pet loss and human loss, but pet loss truly has its own challenges. When learning about pet loss, it's important to learn, like I said when we first started, about the fundamentals of grief as well, and a few of them are listed here. First one is really important, which is everybody grieves differently. And you are never going to find two people. Again, Connie and I have been doing this for quite a while. And I can honestly never say, oh yeah, this is it for even the majority. You know, I deal with a lot of, in my individual practice, I deal with couples who have lost the same pet, and even they are not going to grieve in the same way because they have different personalities, they have different grief histories, they have different relationships with the pet. You see there, and you may have or may not have heard this, that grief has no timeline. Um, Everybody goes through it in their own way, in their own time, and that's okay. And it's super important to share with your clients as well. Everyone is unique. Everyone experiences this differently. I just talked about that grief is different for every loss, right? Well, no, that's actually the third one there. I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself there. But it is different for every loss. Losing my dad was very different than losing my mom. Losing Callie was very different than losing Maz. You know, every single loss you go through has its own little quirks. And the best you can do is just take it day by day and work through it the best you can. Whoa, I don't know why this is doing that now. Okay. So perhaps the most well-known theory when people talk about theories of grief is The Stages of Grief by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. It's also, I would say, out of every theory, the most misunderstood theory, because a lot of people didn't realize, and even on her deathbed, she mentioned that she was sorry that she had written these stages of grief because so many had mistook them. First of all, they were written for people who were dying, not people who were dealing with a loss. And you've probably heard of them before. There's denial, there's anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And one of the positives is these types of feelings, emotions, things that we go through as we go through grief can be identified or relatable to these different stages that she came up with. So it kind of opened our eyes to it. But the problem, like I said, is that a lot of people think, oh, okay, first I'm going to be in denial, then I'm going to be in anger, then I'm going to bargain. And nothing could be more false. I mean, it's just not true. It's further from the truth. A lot of times, because people have heard about these stages, you'll get a client who will say, yeah, I'm in the bargaining stage now. And it's like, no, there are, and I always take the time, because again, even if you want to look at them as stages, the stages are very fluid, and it may be that you don't experience a couple of them. But again, I think her ideas, her basic theory of grief is important. And I think there are things that we can learn by learning about these stages, if you want to call them. I hate that term. But these different things that you will go through, as long as you realize and you help your clients realize there is nothing linear about grief. And a lot of people may not experience 2, 3, or even more of these stages. Oh, come on. Okay, so there's a man named David Kessler who worked very closely with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross toward the end, like the last 10 or 15 years of her work. And he is a thanatologist. He has gone through more than his share of loss as well. He does a lot of bereavement work now. He has his own things more in human bereavement that he does. But he had been through like a school shooting or some type of traumatic event like that. And then even after he had been through that, he lost, while he was doing this work, he lost his 20-year-old son, I believe it was. And in losing his son, he wrote this book called Finding Meaning. And I think there's a lot of good things that you can get out of his work. He talks a lot about finding meaning in the losses that we've had, obviously, and remembering those who have died with more love than pain, honoring our loved ones. And I definitely recommend it if you have time to check it out. It's Finding Meaning by David Kessler. And again, he has written more than that. He has a website. He does his own work. This is a theory that I actually like a lot, although I'm not so thrilled with the term tasks, right? It's by Warden, and he talks about these 4, in his words, tasks of everything starting with accepting the reality of the loss to maintaining a connection to the deceased. While moving forward, I don't like the term moving on either, but moving forward with your life. And I think, again, I like it because I think that is part of what we need to do is to accept the reality. We will talk a lot about the grief fog as we go through this course. And for many of us, the first can be anything from the first week to the first few months, just seem like a blur as we're trying to understand what just happened. It's like an emotional whiplash, right? And as we work through, that's where we can get to that place of maintaining a connection, finding a way to feel our loved ones still close to us, and to have a good life. And then there's this one too, which I think has some good information in it by Strobe and Schutt. And it talks about loss-oriented activities versus restorative-oriented activities. And if you take a look at this, it's called the dual process model. And that's why you see these two. There's loss-oriented activities or stressors. That's things like crying and yearning and sadness. And the restorative-oriented, which is adapting to a new role or managing changes. And if you see, there's two separate areas, but you see that line in the middle bouncing back and forth. Well, that's because that's how people grieve. They may be crying, but they're still able to adapt. They may deal with some anger. So it goes back and forth, and that is very true because grief is not a straight line. When I talk to my clients, I tell them all the time that this journey that you're about to go on is filled with a lot of potholes and detours and U-turns. And it can be very discouraging because you'll get a client that thinks they're doing really well, and all of a sudden they become really sad again. Very normal. That's how we grieve. It's that one step forward, two steps back, three steps forward, only one step back. It's all over the place. It's something you need to be aware of when you're working with clients. You need to be aware of your own losses. It's very normal and expected as people work through the grief. I often get panicked calls from people in my groups or individual sessions saying, I thought I was doing okay, but now I feel like I'm back at square one again. And I always reply to them by, no, you're not. You're not back at square one again. You're just having a bad day. You're going to get through this day, sometimes minute by minute, sometimes hour by hour, but you will get through it. And tomorrow will be a little better. That's what grief is. That's normal. We're going to talk a little bit about the symptoms of grief. They're so varied, as you see on the slide, and we sent you a really good article having to do with the symptoms of grief. There are 4 major categories. It's physical, emotional, behavioral, spiritual. The important thing to realize is that, again, everybody's going to go through this in their own way. Everybody's symptoms of grief are different. Not everybody goes through every category of every symptom. Some people may experience more physical symptoms, like not being able to sleep, feeling ill. They may not experience any of the spiritual symptoms, though. Maybe they're an atheist, and so they are not thinking about God or faith or any of that. That's normal. There is no right or wrong. Well, I say there's no right or wrong. I always say to my clients, there's no right or wrong unless you're physically hurting yourself, right? But there's no right or wrong way to grieve. I really recommend that you do take a look at that article we sent you on signs and symptoms of grief. We recommend that you do read it completely. So we have another question for you, and it is this. It is, whoops, I just lost it. Oops. Okay, then, I'll tell you what it is in a second. Thinking about the last couple of significant losses that you've gone through, what category or categories of grief symptoms do you feel like you were affected by the most? Is it physical, emotional, behavioral, spiritual, kind of all over the place, and a combination of them? Go ahead and put them in there. And so as you're doing your own, answering your own, you can see from others, right? Connie, it seems to be like all over the place again.
All over the place. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Everybody's,
that's how it goes.
yeah. And it's interesting because, somebody might not be able to eat and another person eats too much, and some people might not be able to sleep and another person sleeps too much. And that's just really our own ways of dealing with stress. When you're in some kind of stressful situation, you're going to react that way. So it is all over the map.
Yeah, and I saw something, Connie, and maybe you see it there quicker than I can, about reliving the trauma of having to euthanize a pet. And a lot of people go through that, and you do get affected from
Yeah.
that, and we will definitely talk about that. You will see it in the interviews that you do. You may have experienced it yourself, especially if you've never been through a loss. And unfortunately, sometimes if your veterinary team has not explained what you will go through, it can be very traumatic. And even if you've been through a very peaceful euthanasia, unfortunately, there are times when something may happen that will be a little traumatizing for you. So yeah, I think it was Suzanne who said that. That's a very good point. Okay, we're gonna get back to this. Come on, computer, work with me here. Okay, so now that we've talked about all of that, let's talk about pet loss and the need for support. When facing the loss of a pet, everybody needs support. Maybe a lot of support, and it may be hardly any support, right? For some people, and it's not the kind of people that you'll see in your groups or individual sessions, they're sad for a day or two or even a week, and then they kind of go on with their life. For others, it takes quite a while, and that's why having these support options is really important. As a pet loss bereavement specialist, you're going to need to support your clients, but you're also going to need to support yourself. Connie and I talked about that. In some of the future modules too, we're going to be talking about compassion fatigue and how it can affect you. And I know we have a lot in the veterinary field, and so I'm sure you're aware of compassion fatigue. But even in doing this work and in any caregiver work, but as Figley says, it most often hits those of us working in pet-related fields. We can be affected by it, and that's why Connie mentioned you have to keep your own kettle full in order to be able to help others. With clients, they are going to be surrounded by comments like, come on, don't you think you should be over? It's been a few weeks, or it was just a dog, or it was just a cat. They may not have very much support. That's what you're there for. As a pet bereavement specialist, you are there to support them by being a shoulder to lean on, an ear to listen, not to fix them, but to support them. I love this slide. It's one of my favorite ones, because While it's not where I want things to be, pet loss support is talked a little bit more than before. The emergence of the whole area of pet loss has changed as the way we think about our pets has changed. And that's why I love this slide. I mean, if we were to look at the top slide, you could see, I don't know how many years ago, 40 years ago, even more. And even sometimes today with people living in rural areas, our dog may have protected our house. They had a job to do, or the cats were mousers, right, in the barn. Um, they weren't really a family member. Sometimes they didn't even come into the house. But at that time, we still cared about them. We might have even loved them and petted them and fed them, but we never really thought about them as family. On the right-hand side, and I will tell you, I think the reason I like this slide is that my friend has 2 potbelly pigs, and she will often sometimes take them in California, this is, for a walk in one of the big parks out there, and people will kind of go, oh my God, that's so cool. And so you have pigs having a birthday party, because they've become not just our helpers or protectors, they have become part of our family. Okay. And part of it too, right, is because of um, the fact that our pets are living longer. Years ago, if a cat or dog got old or sick, we'd take them to the vet and we'd have to have them euthanized. Okay. We'd have to have them euthanized. There were not as many veterinary oncologists or specialists or kidney doctors or vets that dealt with diabetes. Today, there's a lot more options for treatment, and pets are living longer, which is great. But what also happens with all of that is that we start questioning what we'll do or what we won't do, what we should do, what we shouldn't do. And then we need to consider costs. And all of these questions can often lead to more feelings of guilt, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about. We have a module just on guilt and anger alone. People need support in getting through all this. Additionally, there's many, many more pet-related services. I mean, I might be aging myself here, but when I was a kid, they didn't have pet sitters. When we went away, we either dropped our pets off at my grandmother's house or they stayed at the vet. There were certainly no doggy daycare centers or pet camps, and we didn't have shirts or hats or anything like that. I mean, my dog's got balls and bones. Again, I'm probably really aging myself here, but it's true. And the more we've started to think about our pets differently, that affects how we feel about them. Think about this. How many times when we talk about our pets, when we think about how we view our pets, do we use the term pet owners? A lot of people don't really consider themselves pet owners, especially if you own cats, right? We are pet parents. You heard me when I talked about Maz's role in my life. He was my best friend. I used to call him my furry soulmate. He definitely was one of my greatest teachers, I would say. A lot of people will talk about anthropomorphism, which is attributing human characteristics onto pets. And I do believe there is some validity to that. But the more and more research is showing that pets do love, they grieve. I have been at many veterinary conferences, and there'll be workshops on how advanced things are getting in terms of realizing what our pets think about, what they don't think about, how they think about it. Everything we've talked about in this section has caused pets to be a huge part of our hearts and our lives. And that's what causes us to need the support. That's what causes our clients to need the support so that they can begin to heal when it's that time to say so long to a pet. We're going to spend some time talking about some unique characteristics of pet loss as well. And we had talked earlier about the different theories of grief. There's also a number of unique and varied characteristics of pet loss. We're going to be talking about 4 of them here, about the caretaker role, disenfranchised loss, unconditional loss, and guilt. This is not to say that these 4 are the only characteristics of pet loss, but they're very prominent, as you'll see when you start to help people who have lost a pet. Let's talk about the caregiver or the protector role. And that is really, again, I talked a little bit before about this, but we see like 3 different levels of pet relationships. One is similar to what you will see with your clients. They are like furry children. There's that increased term pet parents. We've seen both clients with and without human children call their pets their kids. They truly are part of the family. The second is that they are a pet. They're loved, they're cared about, they're taken care of very well physically and given things, but they're just not thought of as pets. And then again, as we've talked about earlier, there is that animal that's more of a object, a piece of property. You might even see that in puppy mills. They're not pets. They're livestock. So it's completely different. The vast majority of people that, as I said, you're going to deal with are people whose pets are like family. That's why a lot of times you'll see this come up, which is this disenfranchised loss. Disenfranchised loss is something that many pet loss clients face. People just don't understand why they're still sad. When you feel deep love for a pet, the grief is going to be very deep. Anytime you love deeply, the loss hurts more. For people, though, who are not pet people, they don't understand. They're frequently, you're going to find clients that they get very angry because they're surrounded by people who don't get it. I always tell my clients, though, not to be angry with those people, but feel sorry for them in a way because they never get to experience that deep love and that beautiful relationship that we did with our pets. You can't blame them for it, they just don't get it. I think we're lucky because we have had that chance to love that deeply and to understand all that pets can give us. Something very important to remember. As pet loss specialists, we may or may not know what it feels like to lose a pet. But it's very important to remember that we do not know how that specific client is feeling. You know what it feels like to lose a pet, but you can't possibly know what's going on in that person's head, what it feels like for them. You don't know their history. So it's crucial, and I do say crucial, to not use the term, I know how you feel. You can say, I get that, I can relate to it, or something similar. But you want to avoid the term, I know how you feel. And actually, there was a study done relating to pet loss, and they asked them what was one of the most difficult things that people said to them. And it was, I know what you're feeling, or I get it. I've been through that too. And it's kind of like, how do you know what I'm feeling? You're not inside of me. So as a pet loss specialist, you definitely don't want to say that. You can be very kind. You can be sympathetic. You can be empathetic. You can be there for that person. You can be that person who listens to them. You can do that even when they tell the same story over and over and over. And they will do that. And honestly, it helps them. The more they're able to share it, it begins to take away some of the intensity of the loss. And then we have, to me, what is the most beautiful part of having pets, which is that unconditional love. It is, to me, the greatest gift that we get from having them in our lives, because I'd say, 90% of us don't know what true unconditional love is. We don't really grow up with it. They don't know that love that doesn't come with any conditions. It's so good to get it. It's almost addicting. You may have even seen those mugs that say, I want to be the person my cat or dog thinks I am. That's what I'm talking about. That they love us beyond anything we do, we say. When I first got Moz, it was really slim pickings. I was a grad student. I was renting a room in a house. And I remember he was a teenager before he got his own, well, almost, I think he was about 10 or 11. When I first got him his first big cat post, and I was so proud. I bought him this big fancy cat post, and my friend came over and we took hours for us to put it together. And I brought him in the room and I'm like, Miles, look what you got. And you know what he did? He walked over, he sniffed it, and he jumped into the box that it came in. He wanted the box, he just wanted to be close to me. It wasn't what I was giving him, it was me. That's the unconditional love they share with you. It shows you how good you are. You can see yourself in their eyes. That's what unconditional love is truly about. And then there's this difficult part, this guilt. And again, we spend so much time talking about it because I think, Connie, I think you probably agree, it's the most common emotion of all of this. I mean, if I was going to say what's the one thing that all my clients go through, or the vast, vast majority, because you can't say all, it would be guilt.
I tell clients it comes with the grief package, but it's not free.
Yeah, right. That is true. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I would say 95% of my clients, and maybe 98%. It's because when we bring these babies into our world, we love them so much. We want their lives to be perfect. We want to fix things. We want to control things. We want every day to be as perfect as it can be. Here's the problem. You can't control age, can't control cancer or kidney disease. And that makes us feel really helpless and scared and angry. And listen, we can definitely learn from guilt. There are things that we could have done better from time to time that could be valid. But hindsight isn't meant to be a lifelong lesson. You don't need to regret those things forever. That's not what it's meant to be about. I will often tell clients when I think they're ready to hear it, something that I realized with Moz, and it's this. It's not really about saving our pets. It's about loving our pets and loving every single day that we have with them. That's what we need to remember. So we're going to get into this last section here. We're going to talk about some of the characteristics that you should have in order to do this work. And we all have our own reasons, our own stories for wanting to help pet parents. And it is true that desire alone can go a long way in determining our success. A lot of people will ask me, I'm in a mental health field, I'm in ministry, but I haven't really lost a pet. Would I still be able to do this work? And while it's not completely necessary, losing a pet does allow you to commiserate, but you can still do this work. I think if you have most of the characteristics, we're going to talk about if you have the ability to grow into these characteristics, then you're a good candidate to be successful in the field. So we're going to start out by talking about some of the characteristics, but before we do that, I have another question for you, which is this: how comfortable do you feel in knowing how to support clients when it comes to the loss of the pet? And once again, just put your answer in the chat box. It can be from anything from I feel very comfortable in knowing what to say or do to I'm really not comfortable at all, and it's probably why I'm taking the course. So go ahead and put your answers in there, and let's see what we got. Connie, I'll let you.
Mostly B.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Right.
Comfortable, but can always learn more. We can always, all of us can always learn
Yeah.
more. Yeah, it's a journey.
And that's what we said. I mean, if you're gonna, and I think somebody said that they may already work in pet loss or mental health, or I think we have a marriage and family therapist. I mean, the day you think you could stop learning about this field is probably the day you should stop doing it.
Yeah.
So, and again, wherever you are, it's okay. I mean, we have had many different fields. We've had ministry, we've had a lot of people in mental health, right? Pet sitters, a lot of veterinary. So we hope that the information in here is going to help you so that you do feel more comfortable.
Tom wrote different scenarios will be challenging, and I think you can relate to this, Sandy. I know if I'm in a chat or a group and or a client and it's a husky, I'm sure you, if it's a Siamese cat, or if it's an animal, that a dog that's named after one of my deceased pets, there's just little triggers that go bing, and they're like, oh, this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you can sail through some of them, and others are really tough to get through. The traumatic losses, the accidental losses, those are really hard to listen to people's stories.
Yeah, and I think, Connie, I don't know if you could see in there, but was it Christine that mentioned about the behavioral euthanasias?
Yeah, those are tough too. Those
And
are real.
we will talk about them. I think it's in the special situations that we added that section.
Yeah, we
Right.
just added that section because, realizing that behavioral euthanasia is one of those things that people feel tremendous guilt over, tremendous guilt.
Yeah. So Christine will be spending some time there. And again, we have people in the animal rescue world, and God bless you. I mean, I cannot even imagine how difficult some of what you Tom, I see a missing pet, right? We talk about that too. So okay, let's get back to it. We're in our last section here. So okay. So in terms of the characteristics, you see this first one, which is compassion, right? And one of the definitions of compassion is the sympathetic concern of suffering of others, right? It's why we're here for a lot of us. We feel moved. We want to help people. We want to know what to say or not to say, and we'll spend a lot of time talking about that too, to help people, to express our concern, to express our compassion. There's also empathy, right? And when we talk about empathy, we talk about the ability to identify with the emotions of others, right? We could have sympathy for somebody. Again, we go back to maybe you haven't lost a pet. And so you could have sympathy for anyone who has lost a pet, but you may not be able to empathize with them. When you're empathizing with somebody, you understand that emotion because maybe you've been through it, or maybe you've dealt with so many clients that you're kind of immersed in it with helping those clients. But it's really about being able to identify at times with those emotions and not being afraid to express them, because it does help your clients. You see here the non-judgment. And some of these characteristics, I always say most of them, me included, it's things that we could do better, we can work on more. And I'm sure Connie can agree with me on this too. I mean, how many times, Connie, have we had a client that we really want to help, but it's like you hear these things and it's like you're thinking, oh my God, how could you have done that? Or what were you thinking? You look at like hoarders, right? Hoarders of animals, and it's not like they're horrible people. I think in the beginning they probably wanted to help animals, but they may have a disorder with, I don't want to say disorder within themselves. It may be a disorder, but something in themselves that doesn't allow them to know when to stop, to know when they can't help. And so,
It,
so go ahead,
it,
Connie.
it usually is a mental disorder. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but I'm sure you've seen it too. I mean, not just hoarding per se, but like those clients where it's like, what were you thinking?
I've had to bite my tongue so it almost bleeds on a few occasions because yeah, those exact same words. What were you thinking? And the thing about it is when someone loses a pet in an awful manner, they're feeling tremendous guilt as well. And so they really need our support and compassion and empathy. And so um, thinking back to a couple I had who tied their dog into the back of their pickup truck thinking they were doing the right thing
Oh,
out and they drug him to death. And so that was the what were you thinking?
yeah.
That took every fiber of my self-control, just like, and because they were just feeling tremendous guilt. And so they had to work through that guilt and before they could even start to address their grieving.
Yeah, and like so part of it there too, right? And we will talk about this more in the communication area. But it's like, how do you help those people without letting it come through in your tone or even in the way you look? I mean, a lot of times, right, you may do a little shudder and not even realize it, or start to like fold your legs or fold your arms.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. It's just kind of like, and we will talk about too this area because and I'll never forget this, and I may tell the story later on in the course too, but I was doing a workshop for a veterinary practice, and this, I think she was the lead client service person, CSR, and she was talking about an experience they had with this woman who, it was an elderly woman, and she would come in with her elderly dog all the time and really be kind of pushy and nasty and kind of, why am I waiting this long? And my dog is sick and my dog needs help. And this went on for a few months. And there was one time where the sister actually of the woman um, drove the lady and her dog to the vet and sat in the waiting room while the woman went in with her dog. And the people behind the desk didn't know that the sister was there, and so they started laughing a little bit about, oh God, there's Mrs. Jones, I shudder for whoever has to deal with her. And the sister went up to the people behind the desk, and she wasn't really nasty, which was good. But she said, I hear you talking about Mrs. Jones. I'm actually her sister, and I'm not mad at you. I know she could be very difficult, but I want you to know that in the last year, she lost her husband and her only remaining son. And all of a sudden, right, it like stops, and it's like, because you don't walk in other people's shoes, and nobody knew what she was going through, and maybe that's why she was so freaked out about everything with her dog. And so we don't know, and that's why it's important not to judge. This could be a really difficult one too, having patience. And again, we'll talk about this a couple of times during the course, but especially and again, everybody's different. The first couple of weeks, the first couple of months, it's like people are in a grief fog. I always say, and I remember sharing this with the woman who ran the group that I went to, I felt like my home wasn't really my home anymore. I struggle with ADD anyway, and it was so hard. I would forget, like I'd be driving and I'd forget what street I was on. And so you may go to a group, or you may have a private session, and you may suggest something to a client and they totally don't do it. And then the next time you say, well, did you think about it like this? And they totally don't do it. And it feels like nothing is getting through. And again, especially in the beginning, it's not all that uncommon, because it's just hard to even remember to brush your teeth in at night and in the morning. It's very hard. And so you need to have patience, not only with new clients, but not everything you know what to do. And this is when we're talking about learning. Something that works for one person is not going to work for everybody else. And then a really important aspect is communication. Being a good communicator is so important. Just like guilt, we have 1 or 2 modules where we go into a lot of detail about communication. In my view, there's 3 parts of being a good communicator. The first is really understanding who your client is. It goes into being non-judgmental and remembering that it's not about you, it's about them. And speaking to them in ways that are helpful to them, that they can understand, in ways that is going to get through to them, to make sure it stays about them. You may have heard about active listening and active listening techniques, which is verbal and nonverbal communication. And we're going to go, again, deeper into that in future modules, but that also can help you to be a good communicator. To me, the key to good communication as a pet loss specialist is speaking from the heart. It's taking away that pet bereavement hat and putting it aside, or the veterinary hat and putting it aside. And if you have lost a pet, being that pet parent again, who could commiserate, who could understand. Obviously, you don't want to go down the different rabbit holes that your clients may go through, but you want to let them know that you get it. You have to be vulnerable enough, and that could be scary, to speak from the heart. Many times I have shed a tear with clients. It helps to build that bond. It helps in communicating if it's real. It's really about opening yourself up and allowing yourself to be touched by their words and for them to be touched by yours. What's the biggest part? I often, when I do workshops, I will say, what's the most important part of communicating with your staff members, with your clients? The most important part of communicating is listening. And for a lot of us, that can be challenging too. It's being a good listener. They go hand in hand with communicating. You have to keep remembering this is not about you, it's about them. And it's very, very easy. And I'm sure Connie could, relate to this too. There are many times when a client's telling me something and I'll think about, oh my God, I want to share this with them, or I think this will help. You need to stop yourself and just listen. Just listen, learn to listen. Clients don't come to you to hear all about your history. They may ask if you lost a pet, but they're there for themselves. So it's important that they are the client. You listen to them. We always say, listen more, talk less. You're going to ask a lot of questions, especially in the beginning, to help understand or to get to be able to help them more. The more clients will talk about their pet, about their sadness, it does take away the intensity of the emotions. When I said about sharing personal experiences, you only are going to share about a personal experience if it's appropriate or if you're asked about your personal experiences. Again, it's not about you, it's about them. I often think, and Connie, you may want to share on this a bit, that for somebody like Connie, right, where she's just lost a pet, it actually helps in relating to others who are new to the grief. Because again, even though Connie, you've spent more years than me in this field, every loss is new and every loss hurts.
Yeah, it does give you a little extra empathy boost.
Yeah. And I think too, that's what makes groups work so well, is because I can share a lot about what to do, what not to do and stuff. And I could share about what may have helped with me and Maz. But when you're sitting in a group next to somebody and your loss is 2 weeks and theirs is 3, there is that ability to communicate, to commiserate a little bit more.
Yeah, we've seen some real magic happen in our groups. There's so much support for each member. It's really an amazing thing to watch.
Absolutely. And in our chat rooms too, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this last one, or next to last one, is about being self-aware. And there's actually 2 parts when we talk about being self-aware. Number 1, you have to be aware of your prejudices and your preconceived notions. We always talk about doing somewhat of a self-inventory. How do you feel about working with children or seniors, men, women? It comes down to doing no harm. If you are not comfortable in helping children, you're probably not going to be the best fit for that client. And so the best thing that you can do is offer a referral. You're there to help the client in a compassionate, non-judgmental way. Again, we talked about hoarders, right? You could think about how could they do that? If that's a little bit of a trigger for you, probably not the best fit. It's best to give them a referral, and you are going to have colleagues again, and we're going to say this over and over and over on this course, which is do no harm. Do what's best for your clients. And then also in terms of being aware again, we need to be aware, what are our triggers? Are we being triggered? Do we need a little bit of self-care? Do we need to talk to our own therapist, or we often talk about this field of having a self-care buddy. How many times, Connie, right, have we talked to each other or people in the chat, that work on the chat room, talking to each other about a really difficult case, so really, just to be able to support each other. It's really, really important. So just remember again, be considerate of or aware of your own preconceived notions and how it affects you, and in how you're being affected by the losses from people that you're trying to help. This one is probably my favorite thing, and we always, we started out talking about, can you be a pet loss bereavement specialist if you haven't lost a pet? Yes, you can. Does it help? Absolutely, it does in understanding. But I think if you understand what animals bring to our lives, if you understand the human-animal bond, you could be quite successful in the field. And I'm going to give you a quick example. My best friend, I've known for 37 years, grew up in a household with no pets. Her family was allergic to them. So as she got older, she never really had the need to have a pet. Yet she always saw me with my animals and with Ma's and knew the relationship. So when I lost him, I honestly wasn't sure how she would react. I will tell you that I got the most beautiful bouquet of roses when she found out I lost Ma. She even offered, and she was living in New Jersey at that time. Well, I was living in California, she was in Jersey. She offered to fly out to California. That's what I'm saying. She didn't really know what it felt like to lose a pet, but she knew how much my animals and Ma's meant to me. We often, most of our modules, like to end with a final thought. And there's this quote from a book that I read by Susan Clothier. She's an animal behaviorist and trainer. And I often use this quote when I do memorial services for my clients. And it's this: there is a cycle of love and death that shapes the lives of those who choose to travel in the company of animals. It is a cycle unlike any others. To those who have never lived through its turning or walked its rocky path, our willingness to give our hearts with full knowledge that they'll be broken seems incomprehensible. Only we know how small a price we pay for what we receive. For our grief, no matter how powerful it may be, is an insufficient measure of the joy that we've been given. And I think for those of us who have loved a pet, worked with a pet, shared a pet, had a relationship with a pet, it is so true and it is so worth it. And that's why people need support. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the share. And we are going to talk a little bit about how to help you get the most out of the course. But before we do, is there any questions that we didn't get to address?
You can put it in the chat or raise your hand or just
Yeah.
put it out.
And I'm just seeing, and I didn't realize this, and I should have brought the charger over here, that I'm down to 12%. So I'm gonna go move by my charger. I'm glad I looked at that, because otherwise I would have lost you. So please bear with me for a second while I change my location and bring my coffee over.
Yeah, take your coffee. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
I'll answer Melanie's question. Do you
Okay.
charge for counseling? Yes, we both do charge for individual counseling.
Yes.
My support group is free. The online chat through Pet Loss Partners is free, and Sandy does charge for her virtual video support group. But yeah, and we'll be talking about that in the marketing module.
Yeah.
I have a question, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Other than normalizing the emotions people feel and letting them know that what they're going through.
Can you hear me?
Oh, hey, just a moment. We have a
Oh,
Slava. Is that how you pronounce your name? Could you turn your volume up a little bit? We can't hear you. Now you're on
You can
mute.
mute, yeah. Can you maybe type in your question in the chat box? Maybe that'd be the easiest way.
Yeah, we could hear you, and now we can't.
Do you want to go ahead and type in your question? We'll go to somebody else and then you type it in and we'll get back to you. So who else had a question?
I did. Can
Sure.
you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. I was looking through all the documents and everything that you sent over, and some of the required suggestions to read and where to find them on the internet. There was one for attachment, and there wasn't a website to go to read up on that. I know attachment is a huge part of, having a pet and losing a pet, and I was wondering if there is, if you'll talk about that.
It was on attachment. You know what? I think honestly, hold on a second. Yeah, I think the word attachment was just to show you that there were 4 attachments. There wasn't a resource for attachment.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to look at it. Connie, do you have it there? I'll try to get it
It
really.
was in the reading suggestions. You had us go to some, I think there were 3 different topics, and then you listed the web address to go to read more about it.
Oh no, it says attachment symptoms of grief, and that was required. That's that.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. So let's see. Slava said, other than normalizing what people are feeling and listening to them, what other roles do pet bereavement specialists have?
I don't know if there's like rules so much. Really honestly, our greatest job, I mean, I think, is to listen, to normalize, and probably more important, validate. And again, not judge and have the patience, and have the knowledge too, right? I'll add that to it. Again, do no harm. If you don't, and for instance, we will talk about PTSD, and we'll talk about EMDR therapy. You cannot do EMDR therapy if you're not certified in it. So, I mean, Connie, I don't know, do you have any comments on that I didn't mention?
No, I agree. And we will talk about cognitive behavior therapy and companioning, those models in a future module. But yeah, it really is just bearing witness to their grief. And when we talk about Dr. Wolfelt's companioning model, is just walking alongside of them with their grief and listening to them, because no one else is listening to them. And that's why they come to us, because everyone else is saying, okay, well, it's been 2 weeks. It was just a dog. You can get another cat. All of those layers that happen when you're dealing with disenfranchised grief. And so we really just do bear witness to their pain. Now, I give my clients a handout at the end of the first session that's got a lot of additional reading and books and support groups and other things that can help them on their journey. And I give them a lot of ideas. We talk a lot, Sandy, about appetite disturbances. So, are you eating? Are you sleeping? Referrals. You might want to go see your doctor if you've got a therapist, if they're up depression and anxiety symptoms. And so we just really act as part of a team to help this client through this experience. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Can you hear me now, by the way?
Yeah.
Alright, cool. I will just add to the question. Is there any part in which you provide any like mental tools or advice on how to memorialize, or anything that is beyond the compassionate listening and holding their hand, let's say, like something that is more in the counseling and tool providing aspect?
Yeah.
Are those?
Yeah. Kind of CBT light. We'll do, thought reframing and things like that. If somebody's ruminating on like the euthanasia experience or something, and absolutely have, other ideas for them to journal, write, have a lot of ideas for them to work through their grief. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
to work through guilt, to work through anger. We spend a lot of times talking about what to say and what not to say. So I guess like we're telling you, oh, it's so important to listen, to validate, to bear witness, right? All of that is true, but yes, you do need a basic understanding, right? You need a basic understanding, and I think, and I always mess up the module numbers, but I think it's module 3 where we talk about different subgroups. Right, I think it's your next module is going to be talking about anticipatory bereavement. And we always talk about things that you can do to help those clients. The last module talks about helping clients at the end of life. You will have 2 modules in the middle where you will actually tell us how you would help a client and I used to try to avoid the term final exam, but it's a final exam, at the end, right? Where you will actually, again, go through a whole process of telling us why you're choosing what you're choosing and what you would say and what you would not say. So there are things like that. Okay, does that answer your question, Sam?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? And again, you could put it in the chats or.
Let's see. Anne Marie said, one of the things that I will be curious as to how we address the best way possible is when clients are going through the anger phase and really want to blame others. And these days, really blaming the veterinary community. Yeah, oftentimes in my work, I deal with clients wanting to blame their primary vets, and I'm able to deal with that well in my appointments. But if I'm assisting them more in some sort of grief counseling, work through how to effectively communicate. Yeah, and like Sandy said, we have an entire module on grief, guilt and anger. Guilt is much more prevalent than anger, but there is an awful lot of anger towards the veterinary community. And I want to apologize on behalf of everyone, because we've heard some just awful stories about how veterinarians and their staff is being treated, and it's just the saddest thing, because man, my hats are off to all of you guys that do that work. Well, bless you all. So yeah, we will be talking about anger and how to help clients address anger.
Yeah, and I'll share a couple of things too. Again, a lot of times and when we talk about anger and guilt, we talk about the fact that it is a whole hell of a lot easier to be angry than it is to be sad. And
Mhm.
yes, when it comes to the veterinary community, it's like shoot the messenger, right? You're there, so they're gonna come at you. And I just last month did a lunch and learn for a veterinary practice, and they were talking about whether or not to have for one of the vets there who was interested in possibly doing a support group. And I did suggest that it not be the vet who actually ran the support group. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but a couple of the reasons are exactly what Connie was saying, is that even when you try to do the absolute best and you did everything right as a veterinarian, as a RVT, you know a lot more about the treatment, about the animal's body, the client's just coming from an emotional perspective and they don't even know that. And truthfully, right at the beginning of loss, they don't really care. They just care that they're really sad and it hurts. And so it can be more difficult for the veterinarian, the person who was there with them through the whole process, to actually run a group. That being said, where vet tax veterinarians really benefit from this, and again, Connie, feel free to add on, is that you can help them along the way, and knowing what to say and what not to say can be huge in a client's healing process.
And anger is almost always very short-lived. It doesn't last for very long. So that's the good news about it.
And
Um,
thank you, Diane, for saying that, because actually Connie and I are, we talked a little bit about it, but we really want to get into vet schools and vet tech schools and be able to share this information because it does make a difference.
Yeah, I gave a talk at University of Alaska Fairbanks for first year veterinary students, and it was just 3 hours in a 1 credit elective course, and I was just so hoping that maybe one day it will not be an elective and it will
Yeah.
be part of their regular curriculum. Okay, so let's see. Before we got we got a lot of questions. I think Tori has her hand up.
Okay.
We'll get to Tori and then we'll get to the typed questions, okay?
Peter, okay, buddy. Okay. Sorry, go ahead, Tori.
Hi, Sandra. Hi, Connie. My question is, are we going to get a specific resource to be able to send referrals and have based on like location or based on knowing that specialist is comfortable? Like my background, I did veterinary assistant for a while. I also did animal rescue for many, many years. And I definitely dealt with a lot of like animal abuse cases, a lot of, hoarding situations, so much very challenging cases that I just can't do that work anymore to that level, unless if it's something simple, I still have my, connections there to help with, certain things, but that was just too much for me. So I know for certain situations, I don't know that I would be the best person, for that client. And, so are we getting like resources to say, okay, I can send them to this specific person that I'm confident is not going to like turn them down for it, for example, just because we used this earlier saying it's a hoarding situation and, or something like that, that I feel like, oh, I don't really want to deal with that, or like how you mentioned the accident with the truck. It's like there's certain things I know I won't be able to be the best person for them with. And I want to make sure that they also don't experience, oh, like go to this person. Oh, that person's not going to take it. Go to this person. And they're just getting sent all over. I don't want them to also have a negative experience as well.
And yeah, I'll just, so what you will get is we talk, and it's toward the end of the class about developing an interdisciplinary team, right? We talk about, in the bonus module about developing relationships, with others so that you do know who to go to, and obviously because you all are located in different places in the states and in different countries, we can't know everybody in every place to be able to refer you to, but we can tell you how to find the best person. What? I mean, Connie, is that an
Yeah, I was just going to mention when we talk about resources and referrals is that you can start to collect your own list of people that you can refer your clients to. And
Okay, wonderful.
actually,
Thank you.
so much therapy now is done online is
yeah.
for like a rural community where I am. And so you can find somebody online. No, and you know, and just talk to them and say, you know, I can do this. Is this something that I could refer clients to you, and then you kind of build that relationship. So, yeah, that's definitely something you can do.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
That's all the questions. Somebody wanted to know instructions for homework assignments, and it says all the instructions in the attachments. Please, please, please carefully read through the homework assignment instructions. It might seem like a lot at first, but once you get through it and start submitting your assignments, it will become second nature. We just really ask that you follow these instructions because it really makes grading your papers a lot more easier and a lot more pleasant, and we don't have to tease through all of these words to find the answer to a question. So
Yeah, and you know, I'll say I put a few notes here that I wanted to mention really quick. Again, to me, if you keep that guide with you, I think it's called Guidance for Completing Homework or something like that. Read that and keep it with you. And Connie's absolutely right. In the beginning, it's a little overwhelming, right? The more you do it, it's the same from week to week, what we're looking for, what we're not looking for. When you turn in your homework, we have a week from the day it's received to get it back to you. So if it's 9-10 days and you haven't received a grade, please be sure it's your responsibility to check with us and make sure we got it. And if there's a delay, you know, for last class, for instance, we were shorthanded. Connie took some time off when she was going through her loss, or I was in the hospital the time before that. So things do come up, but so it is your responsibility to be sure if you don't get that grade, that we received your homework.
yeah, don't attach it to one of Sandy's emails out to everybody. Make sure that it comes
Yes.
to its own email, because if you attach it, if you do a reply to us with some email, it'll get buried so deep we won't find it.
Right. For instance, like that module 1 with the attachments, do not reply to that with your homework. Every single time, start a new email. The subject line is your name and the module number. Okay. Anything else I'm trying to see really quick?
If you have any questions, you can always email the Pet Loss Partners email, and one of us will get right back to you.
Yes. Again, every time you do your quiz, you do your assignment, the reflection does not need to be turned in. And even if you include it, we're not gonna read it unless you tell us, hey, can you give me your thoughts on this? Okay. Starting module 2, I think, we do ask you to interview somebody. Again, take the time to read the guidance. That'll give you a lot of information about that. Every week, you will receive a new module. We're not gonna, and this happens every time, but I'll say it again anyway. Modules 2, 3, 4, and 5 are not webinars. We're not gonna be here next Sunday at 7. So if you come, you're just gonna see nobody's here kind of thing, right? So 2, 3, and 4, and 5 are study guides that you get. That being said, we are going to have our first group call after module 4. Okay. So you will get the assignment by 1:30 Eastern time on Sunday. You have until Friday night to turn it in. To be truthful, you know, if you turn it in anytime on the weekend, you're not going to get points off. If we do not receive your assignment by Monday, that following Monday, right? And you turn it in that day, we are going to take 5 points off. Okay, so if something is preventing you from, you know, you're not feeling good, your kid's not feeling good, your pet's not feeling good, sometimes you have to go out of town or work is crazy, we're here to work with you, but if you don't tell us, we don't know. Trying to see if there's anything else.
I have another question if we have time. No?
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would love to know from your experience, what does the client's journey usually look like in terms of like, how does one know that they need support, or how does a vet know to refer to a pet bereavement specialist and not like, you know, commit ambulance chasing of some sort? So I'm trying to understand like what kind of partnerships we can have to not use the vulnerable moment of a client to get them to come, but like how do we recognize the need and
I think from a veterinary staff point of view, and we will talk about this at length when we talk resources and referrals, is that we recommend, if you're in a veterinary staff, that you give a folder of resources to every single person who's lost a pet. Whether what they do with it or not, that's up to them. But you know, here's a folder of some resources in case you feel like you might need some support, you know, after you get home. And then it's up to the person. They can look at it and look at who, you know, whoever you've developed a relationship, grief counselors, you know, support groups, whatever, all those people and groups that you're referring to them to, then it's up to them to decide if they need the extra support. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, from the point of view of the referring party, yeah, but like I'm trying to understand it from the point of view of the client. How does one know that it's not just a temporary healing process they will go through on their own? Like how does one know that they need assistance? I understand if someone is stuck.
Okay. Oh, so you're talking from the bereaved person's point of view.
Like I'm trying to
Boy,
understand. I mean, not anticipatory and not like explaining to the children. I'm talking about someone who is an adult who is functioning and he lost a pet and is feeling awful and it's been a month. Like at what point do people even, from your experience, know to reach out for help? Like what does it look like?
boy, that's all over the map.
yeah, let me say this, and again, like we were talking about, every time it's different. And I'll share this, and Connie was just mentioning it, and it relates to what you're saying. So was mentioning that we do recommend that every client who loses a pet should get a referral folder, right? That being said, and we always, when we do workshops at veterinary conferences or with a veterinary practice, we always tell people in the veterinary field, what you don't want to do is after euthanasia, you don't want to walk up to them and say, oh my God, here's a card. You need to call this person, right? Because even when you know your dog's, 17 years old, it's not doing well, or the dog had or the cat had cancer, right? I don't want to pick on a dog every time. The cat had cancer. So you know what's going to happen. That initial response is, what just happened? I walked in here with my pet. I'm going home all by myself. What the benefit of the folder is that now it's, and I'll use my example, okay, with Moz. I was working in a very different field, nothing related to psychology. It was marketing, it was consulting. I was unable to go to work for 2 weeks. I almost lost my job. Thank God I had worked for him, my boss, for many years by that time. He knew my parents, he knew my cat. So he knew what I was through. But at the 2 week period, he said to me, I'm really, really sorry, and I've been more than generous, I think, in trying to help you through this, because I was the general manager. If you can't get back to work on Monday, I am going to have to work, start looking for somebody else. Jeter, I was going to call Moz. Jeter, it's okay. So what I did, and again, this is 2007, much less known about pet loss than now. I went to a psychiatrist and I actually got on antidepressants, and I probably needed them for about 6 months. So when do you know? I knew then that I couldn't lose my job. I had to do something. It may be that, you're married and your wife is like, you need help, right? We need to find you some help. Maybe that every single time it's going to be different. It's not like, I wish I could tell you, if they stand on their head with, or if they're driving funny, or if they're talking funny. I wish I could tell you those things to specifically look for. That's the hardest thing about pet loss, is that every time it's different. And for every person it's different. And so a lot of times I have had, Connie, I'm sure you've had it too. I've had people whose loss was 6 months ago and they just found me now. Because they didn't realize it. All of a sudden it's like, I can't go on like this, or they didn't even know we were out there.
Well, in that case, it sounds like it matters that to not create like an incentive. Like for example, if the vet gets a cut, then he would do more inappropriate suggestions of, you probably need grief or counseling or whatever. What's in this folder? You mentioned a referral folder. What is
Yeah,
that?
yeah. You would have pet loss grief counselors, pet loss support groups, maybe a bibliography. I can send the list of resources that I send my clients. So online articles, maybe some articles about guilt.
And we're going to share more like that. We'll get there. You're in module 1 now. And this brings up a good point, and you're going to read it in the guidance thing. Right now, you should not even think about helping anyone who has lost a pet. Right? Right now, the only thing you should think about is learning. You're here to learn. You shouldn't even think about helping somebody with pet loss, even after you go through the communication techniques. Your job right now is to learn, right? And so we'll get there. So again, right now we're in module 1. So give it a chance. Okay.
Was that Christine? Did you have a question? No? Oh, okay. You were just swatting them. I thought I saw your hand raised. Anybody else have a? Yeah, be patient. We've got 10 more modules, so we will get there.
Connie, I had a question. Is there going to be any type of spiritual material and how it relates to pet loss and how we would apply it?
Um, so we taught in, I think it, again, I'm horrible at remembering the module numbers. Somewhere in the second part of the course, we talk about aftercare and a little bit about religion and things like that. Yes. So we do have a module on that. Again, in the referrals that I give a lot of referrals having to do with aftercare and religion, right? But you have to realize that you're going to get a lot of clients who don't have any faith, and that's okay too. Again, it's about being there to validate them and accept if that's where they are, then that's where they need to be. And I right now have a client a private client who started, and she always says, I've been working with her now for about 9 months. She was a devout atheist. And all of a sudden she wants to read books, this one book that's called Animals in the Afterlife. She just wants to see what it's about. I don't know that. And even she said, I hope you don't think if I read it. I'm like, I don't think anything. If you want to read it, read it. Right? Again, it's meeting the client where they're at. But we do address that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I've read that book too, by the way.
Connie, do you have anything on that or?
No, other than, yeah, you will have clients who aren't necessarily spiritual and who will be struggling with the idea of where their pet has gone. That's it's always a difficult conversation to have with them. Yeah,
Did
I always say it was that quote by Will Rogers. If dogs don't go to heaven when I die, I want to go where they go. And so that's kind of my thought about it.
was there a question from Annalie that had to be addressed or?
She just is looking for advice in the future to learn how to still maintain my grief journey without it affecting others. And that's just a lot of what, when we talk about self-care at the end of the course, we'll be talking a lot about self-care because yeah, you do have to take care of yourself. And I tell you, almost every therapist I know has their own therapist. So, you know, there's really nothing wrong with seeking therapy for yourself because like we say, you cannot pour from that empty cup.
And a good thing too, Connie, and what we've seen it, you know, so unfortunately, and we've had during the course students who have lost a pet, but also during the course, there'll be a module where there's a trigger, right, for you. If there is a trigger, please address it with us and we'll work with you on it, whether you need support or whatever it may be. Okay, but don't think you can't talk to us about it. You can. Okay. Anything else? Anything else in the chat or?
I don't think I missed anything.
I know we're kind of like at that 2-hour window where we normally, you know, each webinar, like I said, is between an hour and a half and 2 hours. And I want to kind of say, I think you guys are also going to be an amazing group to work with because for a first module, how can I say this? You should be talkative. You know? So, which is good. We like that better.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had classes where it's just like looking at a wall of faces and nobody's saying anything or doing it, asking any questions and like, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. So,
Yeah, we really like interaction. We really, you know, like the questions and we will try to answer them to the best of our abilities.
yeah. All right, well, with that being said, and Connie, if you could please stay on for a few. We'll let you get back if you're getting ready to have dinner or getting ready to go to bed, which is kind of like where I am. We'll talk to you soon. We'll email you soon and thank you for joining us.
See you later.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.
You too. Oh.
Hold
Oh,
on.
I need my dinner.
Huh?
I need my dinner. Oh, stop the recording.
Oh, okay, hold on. Where is it? Oh, there it is. They always change the